And welcome back, everyone, to the top of the hour. I'm Mark Johnston, your host here for VID5, sponsored by our wonderful friends over at Laurentian Bank Securities. And at midday, we have the great opportunity to step outside of individual companies and look really at the sector from a bird's eye view. And what better person to join us for that perspective than Byron King, the editor of Whiskey and Gunpowder. Sir, welcome to VID5.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you, everyone out there who's watching or viewing, and either in real time or in the future, you'll be watching it on YouTube or what have you. Good to be here. So shall we kick off?
Let's kick off. Byron, I'm going to step out of your way. I know we have a wonderful presentation. We'll come back with a few Q&A at the end of your session. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, miners, markets, newsletter writers, what have you done for me lately? First of all, we are here today and tomorrow and what have you to talk about mining, and to make it all work, miners need money. And so let's just get to the crux of the point here. That's what we're doing. That's why we're here. To do mining right requires a few things. It takes money, and it takes really smart, creative people. It takes more money. And then you take those people and you have their ideas and you apply them to geological assets. The better, really. And you can't have too good of an asset. You can never have too high of a grade or what have you. And it takes more money, and it takes equipment and energy, hard work and luck. Energy being oil, natural gas, diesel fuel, lots of that, electricity if you can do it. Some of that luck, you just never know where it's going to be. And then more money. So that, in a sense, that part about money, that involves you, the viewers out there. We're here courtesy of Laurentian Securities. Thank you, Laurentian. Companies that are presenting. It's a nice list of companies, of wide variety. I've seen all of these names over the years. Some of them I know better than others. Everybody has their ups and their downs. Some days are better than others. Some years are better than others. People are out there trying to make it all work. We're going to talk about that in a moment as we get into it. But I hope that you're getting some benefit out of watching the presentations, and be asking questions. And when it's all over, go and email the companies and email management. And again, we'll get into that in terms of what I'm going to talk about here in a few moments. As for me, I'm a geologist, and I write newsletters, and my beat is all over the place, and I kind of know things. I am a geologist. I have a rock hammer. See, I have my rock hammer. I actually have a hard hat. This is my hard hat, like that. Last time Mark had a hat, and we were comparing hats, but he didn't wear a hat this time. That's okay. So I got a hard hat, and to be a real geologist, you got to have Brunton compass. There's my Brunton compass. This one's like brand new. I got it right before COVID hit at the GSA convention, Geologic Society of America, from the Brunton Company. This one's made out of aerospace grade aluminum. It's the kind of stuff they build space satellites out of. It's an incredible device, simple but effective. People have been using them for 100 and something years. I actually have one from 1913, but I don't take that one into the field. It's sort of an artifact. But I do get around. I got some pictures here. That's me and Vladimir Lenin in Kyrgyzstan. That's me in the Alaska pipeline. It was summertime, not winter. You can tell because there's no snow. There's me a couple thousand feet down in a South African gold mine. So I get around because it's important to get around. I've done a lot of things in my life. I studied geology. I was good at it. Then I went into the Navy for a while, the US Navy. I flew airplanes. I was an anti-submarine warfare guy. And you say, what the hell does that have to do with geology? And I say, well, at the time, I didn't really quite understand it, but it actually has a lot to do, because I was dealing with all this Navy equipment that was made out of really exotic stuff. I mean, specialty alloy steels and incredible electronics and all sorts of other things. And where did that come from? It came from the industrial base of, let's call it the former United States, because much of that industrial base is gone. The steel mills, the rolling mills, the mines and the mills where these things were made. A lot of that stuff's not there anymore. The electrical equipment, the ships were full of General Electric Company, Schenectady, New York stuff. Well, that's all gone, but it's a different world now than it was then. And I'll say also, and since I have a couple more minutes than I thought on this, flying around over the world's oceans was a very geological experience, because the world's oceans are among the oldest geologic feature in the world or on the planet. I mean, the ocean basins themselves, they come, they go. Plate tectonics, they have the mid-ocean ridges and the seafloor spreads, and it subducts at the subduction trenches. So, I mean, the oldest seafloor on the planet is maybe, I think, around 225 million years old. There might be some older seafloor that's included in rocks, on the continent. But the ocean itself, that water body that moves around, is one of the oldest geologic features in the world, on the planet. It's been around for, literally billions of years, and many of the mineral deposits that we deal with are artifacts of oceanic processes. We'll get into that in a minute without getting too sciencey about it. I like that picture on the left there, that me standing next to a box of rocks. I'm in the basement of a museum in Moscow, on one of the ring roads around Moscow, and that box of rocks belonged to Joseph Stalin. That was Stalin's box of rocks. It's radioactive materials from across the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Geological Society gave this presentation box to Joseph Stalin back in around 1949 or 50, and he was very pleased with it. From all over the USSR, these radioactive minerals. And so Stalin died, and then they put it in the Stalin Museum, and then one day the KGB or GRU or whoever does this stuff was sweeping it for bugs and anything else. And they ran a Geiger counter next to this thing. And this box of rocks is like hot. It's emitting radiation. It's like a little Chernobyl right there. Not a Chernobyl really, but it's pretty hot. So they gave me that white robe to cover myself and keep from, getting zapped with ionizing radiation. And I stood next to the box and got a photograph. And then I stepped away from the box, and I'm still here to talk about it. But I have been working in the newsletter business since 2004, which, if you use all your fingers and some of your toes, it's 17 years covering energy, metals, mining, defense, things like that. And as I said, I get around. I spent a lot of years covering, mines and metals, gold, silver, platinum group metals, copper, nickel, rare earths, a whole lot of other things. I mean, I've done energy and as well, oil, gas, uranium, thorium. And there are a couple pictures of me at Victoria Gold in the Yukon, and Atlantic Gold, in Nova Scotia, and Hart Gold in Ontario. I mean, it's really a pleasure to go visit a mine or a mill, and they're actually producing gold. Hey man, this is good. We're on the right side. We're on the right side of the curve when we're doing that. Before COVID, in the olden days, I used to travel a lot, and I have the stamps in my passport and the frequent flyer miles to prove it. It is, to me, as a geologist, it is very important to go there, buy your own ticket and get there. But then once you're there, then the company, they pay for the helicopter ride or whatever. They put you up in a hotel or motel, whatever. You buy a couple meals and everything. But you're out there in the field, you're visiting the site, you're kicking the rocks, you're meeting the people, meeting the geologists, going to the core shack, looking at lay it all out. Show me your geophysics, show me your geochemistry, put it on the table here, put the rocks on the table, break out the magnifying glass. Let's whack on these things and see what do you got? Show me your stuff. For a while, COVID put a stop to all that traveling, which really kind of interferes with your work as when you do this stuff for a living. I'm pleased to say things are getting a little bit better, but who knows? I mean, with COVID and what's going on, there's no saying where this is all going. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. Take your vitamin D, take your zinc pills, and get a vaccine if you want to do that. That's fine. I'll share with you that I actually tried the ivermectin. That stuff works great. It is not horse medicine. It won a Nobel Prize for medicine in 2015. I think it kills a lot of bad things inside of you. I'll just say that. But I'm not a doctor, and I don't play one on TV. But I'm just telling you. But so there we go. Timeout though, because what is a newsletter writer? I mean, I'm a newsletter writer. All right, what's a newsletter writer? Well, let's say the modern incarnation of a newsletter writer. It goes back to 1938 on Fleet Street in London. Fleet Street being the home to many newspapers. There was this guy named Patrick Maitland, the 17th Earl of Lauderdale. 17th Earl, man, that's a lot of Earls. He was born in 1911, so you do the math. 1938, the guy's like 27 years old, right? He's about 3-4 years out of university. He was working as kind of a junior newspaper guy on Fleet Street. A very British thing to do, And he was a very, very smart guy, a very brilliant guy. And he traveled a lot and talked to people. He's an earl, so he's connected with the royal family and Whitehall and everything else. So he takes a trip to Germany in 1938. He goes around, he visits people, he talks to he talks to business people, he talks to normal people, he talks to the politicians, Nazi party people, he talks to the military. He comes back and he writes a letter to his friends. He had a bunch of friends. He wrote this letter, printed it up, maybe a bunch of copies, and sends it out to his friends. Dear everyone, I have just been to Germany, and we're going to have a war with Germany. We're going to be in a war very soon with Germany, and it's going to cover Europe. It's going to engulf everything. A very alarmist letter. So this thing went out to about 100 people who were close friends. Within days, people all over Britain had heard about this letter. Like, whoa, who's this guy talking about? This is 1938. A lot of people. I mean, it's hard to today, many decades later, hard to think back. A lot of people, oh, there's not going to be a war. I mean, Britain has its navy, France has its army. It's still a depression. Germany's not going to be. It went against the grain, but he said, hey, we're going to have war. What do you know? A year later, the war breaks out, and a lot of stories there. But meanwhile, Maitland, he's already well connected, but now that he's made this prediction, he's even more famous. People have been contacting him saying, "Hey, Maitland, would you put me on your mailing list? I'd like to get a copy of those things that you're sending." So he starts this mailing list, and he's like, "Well, I need to pay for the stamps, I need to pay for the printing and the paper. I'm going to charge people for it. Why not? British, Britain and capitalism, Fleet Street, newspapers, all that." So he starts charging for this thing called the Fleet Street Letter, which he began publishing in late 1938 and into 39. Then the war broke out, and now everybody wants to read the Fleet Street Letter. So he was getting all these great scoops, because he's totally connected. He knew people, and once you're successful, that success builds on itself. People send you other things, and and so he wrote the letter till about 1943. Then he went to work for the British Foreign Office, working on issues in the Balkans, namely Yugoslavia. That's a polite way of saying that he went into British intelligence at MI6. And he worked for the Foreign Office. And when the war ended, he wrote a couple books and kind of went back into, he got into sort of the whole Cold War thinking and became a member of Parliament. And he went on to other things. Now, the Fleet Street Letter itself sort of went away for a while. Then it was revived in the 1970s by a guy named Nigel Ray, and later this guy named William Rees-Mogg. And this was in the olden days of letters where you would write the letter or type it up, whatever, send it to the printer, and then they'd print, however many thousand copies. People would stuff the envelope and mail it out. And this was the British version of it. So that's kind of the origin of the modern newsletter. So when you say, well, what's a newsletter writer? Well, Patrick Maitland and, Lord Rees-Mogg, people like that. Okay, well, that's pretty cool. Those are pretty big shoes to fill. What's happening with newsletters now? And well, I'll tell you, we're a long way from 1938. In the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, we still had that paper newsletter thing. Individuals, group of people would get together, they'd write about things, print it up. A lot of people would stuff the envelopes. Then you'd send out promotions, and then, this is in the days before the internet. Okay, it's only mail. It's only like snail mail. You'd send out the promotion you'd rent a name list, with tens of thousands, 10, 20, 30,000 names on it. You'd send it out to these people, and then you would hope and pray that 2 or 3 weeks later you would get envelopes back with checks in it saying, here you go, here's my check, I'm signing your newsletter. And it was a small sort of a cottage industry, really. I mean, not big in the publishing world. I mean, it's not the New York Times, not the Wall Street Journal, not Time Magazine or anything like that. Then along came the 2000s, and the internet opened things up to mass solicitations. We're not just sending out solicitations to 10,000, 20,000 people. You're sending them out to 200,000, 400,000, 800,000 people, these mass email solicitations. And if you're out there watching, you may very well have received these solicitations. Or 300% returns in 2 weeks, the big banner headlines and stuff like that. We talk about the fear and the greed. Are people fearful and they want to protect it? Well, then you should have a fear headline. Are people greedy and, you can make all this money? Give them a greed headline. But with online sales, people slap down the credit card, boom, you got it, got the information, it's data-driven business metrics. It's the same thing that people say about Facebook or Google or whatever. I mean, your information is there in the system. Ideally, with a lot of newsletter companies, they don't market it and manipulate it the way like Facebook does. I think it's probably a mistake to even use that term in the same sentence, but I'm just going to let you in on the secret here. I'm giving you the courtesy of being honest. What is a newsletter? What's a newsletter writer? The newsletter publishing business anymore is all about sell, sell, sell. I mean, it's always been sell, sell, sell because you got to keep the doors open, but it's a sales business. You put out the promotions, you get in the signups, you have some money, you pay the bills, but you plow that other money back into more promotions and sell, sell, sell some more. You've probably seen these solicitations for like what we call the front end newsletter. That would be like the $49 a year newsletter. But for you, a special deal. If you act right now, you get $29 a year. Do they make money at $29 a year? Not really. The idea though is to get your name, into the system. And that's okay. There's nothing nefarious about it. They're trying to sell newsletters and we need names. And okay, great. You sign up, you get your $29 newsletter, and every month you get an email or there are very few newsletters that still actually send out a paper newsletter anymore. That's expensive and that's kind of old fashioned, So that's the front end newsletter. But then there's the back end newsletter. Let's say you've got, pick a number. Let's say you got 20,000 subscribers to the front end. You think, wow, that's a lot of subscribers. Well, then you sell them on the back end newsletter, which is a more higher end newsletter. We're going to get into these micro ideas, these smaller ideas, and that's the $499 newsletter, or the $14.99, or the $24.99. Those are the expensive ones that you see. And if you sell a few hundred of those, boom, there's a big whack of money right there. And that's the business model, and that's the publishing model behind it. Now, in terms of like who's doing what, I mean, you've got your editor who writes the newsletter. Maybe you have research assistants who help. You've got a whole back office that takes care of all that stuff about who's going to process the credit card, and who keeps track of the name list, and it's division of labor, and it's a business, and it's not that small anymore because the newsletter business online has grown just like many other online businesses have grown. So that's kind of what's happening in recent history. Now, about 2019 or so, just 2 years ago, that business model started to crack. It didn't fail. It didn't fall apart. Didn't fall off a cliff, but it started to crack. It's like, whoa, the pushback or the lack of success in that kind of online sell, fear, greed headline, that kind of stuff. That it wasn't working so strongly anymore. And it's like, what's going on? Like, well, part of it is that there's just a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of business news out there, investment news. You've got your traditional business press, you got your Wall Street Journal, you got your New York Times, you got Bloomberg, you got CNBC, and all these, they all have their YouTube channels and everything else. So there's a lot of that out there, just the normal business press. You've got a lot of banks and investment houses that offer gratis, their research. Well, okay, yeah. Now, obviously, they tend to push their book, but I mean, the research is the research, and ideally, they've got smart people who are doing it, and you hope they're being honest about it. To me, it helps if I it helps me when I go someplace and I can actually show me the core, show me the geology. Let me talk to the geologist, things like that. But you got that. And then you've got a lot of people out there just kind of giving it away. I mean, you've got bloggers and podcasts, like Seeking Alpha, not to name names, but just it's out there, and some of those Seeking Alpha people, they've got their own sites, and they actually make really good money doing what they do. And then, of course, in the last 2 years, why is the business model cracking? Well, because the markets have just been doing this. The markets have just been going that way, up, 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 up. And a rising market makes everybody a genius. It's like, well, Kramer said to buy. Why should, Kathy Wood at ARC said, this and this. Why should I buy a newsletter when I don't need you guys. I don't need you newsletter guys. I'm just putting it into an index fund that is going up. And I mean, what could go wrong, right? What could go wrong? And then in 2020, and the days of COVID and lockdowns and all that stuff, I mean, you got tens of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people across the world sitting at home in front of their desk with an internet hookup, And, and in the United States, you had people getting checks and unemployment and 300 or 600 a week supplemental unemployment. People got, all these people sitting around doing their thing from home on their computer with, a lot of them getting, money coming in, the stimulus money and all that stuff. And you would think they'd buy a newsletter. Well, no, they didn't. I mean, why not? Well, because you've got these examples like, the like Bitcoin. I've got Bitcoin here. I've got Tesla here. And like the little red line, the little green line down there. That's Amazon and Google. You think Amazon and Google, they've done really well. Yeah, well, like look at Tesla and look at Bitcoin. Look at what they've done. I mean, we're talking Starship level, warp drive. And when you've got things like that and you're competing, I mean, how can a humble newsletter writer who writes about, say, gold being that little purplish line at the very bottom that looks like it's almost dead, it's just a little flat line at the bottom of the chart. How do you compete against Tesla? I mean, the market says, I don't need you. I don't need you. I got Tesla. I got Bitcoin. Yeah, okay. It's been harder to sell newsletters. Part of it's demographic. A lot of the demographic group that used to buy newsletters is aging out. People in there, the baby boomers or the pre-baby boomers. The 1930s and 40s. People who were born then. They're fairly elderly now. Just do the math. Then the baby boomers. I mean, the bow wave of them. They're in their 70s. Boomers are in their 60s. And they're getting away from it. The younger crowd, the millennials and the Generation Z, they're coming into it, and a lot of them have student debt. They can't buy a house, can't buy a car. I don't buy stocks. I don't have any money. But if they do have any money, again, what do we need your newsletter for? I've never seen a bear market. All I know is that the market goes up. I just buy Tesla or I buy Amazon or I buy whatever, and I'm making money. Who needs you? So that's part of what's going on in the newsletter business. And all you can do is say, well, okay, well, we're here for when you need us. We're here for when you need us. Crowds make markets. Markets follow crowds. Here you are. This is your stock market. This is the American economy. A day at the beach. It's just great, Crowds get scared sometimes, though, and they go away. Something happens. You think, what could happen? Everything's great. Well, lots of things. Now, one thing in the newsletter business that is working is that when you present information through what we call gurus, I'm just going to tell you, I work with Jim Rickards, and he is a wonderful guy, and I work with George Gilder, and he is a wonderful guy. These are two outstanding people who are gurus in their field. Jim is the author of, 6 or 7 New York Times best-selling books. George Gilder is the author of, 8 or 9 or 10 New York Times best-selling books. Jim Rickards used to work, well, he's done a lot of things. Among other things, he worked for the CIA as the war game guy for financial war games. If you don't want to like drop nuclear weapons on another country because that's kind of messy, if you just want to take them down, how do you break their currency? How do you break their banks? He developed those kind of games for that Langley organization. I mean, he's written books in 2010 called Currency Wars, which was about just sort of that. He wrote another book in 2013 called The Death of Money, not the death of the dollar, but not the death of the euro or the pound or the death of money. Road to Ruin, New Case for Gold, he wrote in 2016. Aftermath, The Coming Chaos, I'm reading from my little list here. Earlier this year, I think January or February, he published a new one called The New Great Depression, where, it sounds alarmist, but when you read the books, it's like, oh man, this guy, he understands it. And George Gilder, for example, he really hit it out of the park back in about 1983. I think he wrote a book called Wealth and Poverty. Guess who read it? Ronald Reagan. Next thing you know, he's in the White House talking to Reagan about economic policy, things like that. Gilder has been ahead of the curve. He's been 10 years ahead of the curve for 40 years. In 1990, he wrote 2 books. One was called Microcosm, The Quantum Revolution in Economics and Technology. This was 1990, okay? This was like he predicted the internet. There's where it was going to go. He wrote a book in also 1990 called Life After Television. And if you're old enough and you remember television in the 1980s and how do you replace television? Well, today we look back and we think, what is television? Who watches television? You watch network programming? Give me a break. In the year 2000, he wrote a book called Telecosm, the Broadband Revolution. He wrote a book in 2018 called Life After Google, as in something's going to replace Google. I mean, he's talking right now about the life after the internet. When you get somebody like Jim Rickards or George Gilder as gurus, they write the big macro stuff, and that sells pretty well. And then Jim and George, they both have staff who help them, in terms of, these are investment ideas. So like the newsletters, you've got a front end, you've got a back end. Actually, you have more than one front end and more than one back end, but they fill niches. And I just mentioned these two gentlemen because they are wonderful people, both of them, and immensely smart, absolutely brilliant. You will absolutely raise your IQ by, hanging around these people, listening to what they have to say. One thing that also is absolutely clear is that we're in a bubble, and that bubble's going to pop. This is a chart from the FRED, the St. Louis Federal Reserve, and this is the total of margin accounts. Okay, and it starts, I think I can read it, 1950. 1950. That was, let's see, do some math. That was 71 years ago. It's a long time ago, and there was virtually no margin. Today, according to the Federal Reserve of St. Louis, it's up around 600 billion with a B. Now, what's all that margin stuff doing? Well, it's not buying long shares. It's not like people are out there, but I'm going to borrow and I'm going to buy, the shares and I'm going to own them. No. A lot of that money is fueling these momentum plays, these rocket plays. It's synthetic demand, is what it is. You're buying calls on Tesla. How do you think Tesla did this? Do you think Tesla did this because they were selling so many more cars, or because the Tesla electric car is so much better than the BMW electric car, or the Volkswagen, or the Ford, or you name it? I mean, Tesla's got some smart people, but I mean, their electrical engineers aren't any smarter than the ones that work for Ford or Volkswagen or anything else. These are calls driving that thing up into the stratosphere. Well, when the calls expire, what do? Well, you roll them over into more calls now, don't you? And you do until you don't. And when you can't roll over the calls, what happens? Your synthetic demand dies a fast and miserable death. As they say, the market takes a stairway up and the elevator down. So it's going to be the guillotine. When the crash comes, the crash will come. Will it be next week? Will it be next month? Will it be 3 months from now? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. The market's going to do what it's going to do. But again, newsletter writer wise, we're here when you need us. We'll be here. So the Fed giveth, the Fed taketh away. Do not trust these people. They are not your friends. They are not there for you. They have a whole nother agenda, and it doesn't involve making life easy for you. And it makes you think that if only somewhere there was some sort of monetary reserve stuff, some sort of a thing that that isn't subject to these crazy whims of synthetic demand and these crazy whims of margin. And if only there was something that had worked historically over time, and especially when paper currency blows up. Central banks, they don't hold Bitcoin. I have yet to hear about central banks. I mean, you hear about El Salvador playing with it, but good luck with that, boys. We'll see. But banks do hold gold, and before everything completely crashes into a smoking hole, as Winston Churchill once said of the United States, eventually the United States does the right thing after they've tried everything else. Same thing with central banks. Before the currency crashes into a smoking hole, somebody's going to look out and they're going to say, well, we got that gold in Fort Knox and out there West Point and Denver at the mints. And other countries, look at the gold holdings in China, Russia, all these places. If only there was something out there, but I just can't think of what it might be. Meanwhile, I'd like to just point this out. It seems obvious, but I want to point it out anyway. That making money is different than creating wealth. On the left, we have stacks of dollar bills, or $100 bills. What does that take? It takes paper, it takes ink, it takes printing presses at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. And for a few $100,000 worth of paper and ink and whatever, you can print billions and billions of dollars worth of money. but have you created anything? Well, I don't know. You can take that and you can make a claim on real things with it, but that's not wealth. That's just money. On the right hand side here, we have real wealth, which brings us in many respects to our discussion today. We're talking about mines and miners. I could put an assembly line where people make cars or airplanes, or a fabrication shop where people make computer chips or things. That's real wealth. That's real stuff. Those are real things. When you take ore out of the earth, where it's been for a long, long time, I mean, there's no new ore being formed except maybe in black smokers at the middle of the Pacific Ocean or something. But that's not even ore. That's just kind of metallic crud that comes out through these volcanic vents. But when you're taking ore that's out of the ground, it's been there for tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions of years, literally billions in some cases, and you're turning it into something useful like copper, lead, zinc, gold, silver, platinum group metals, rare earths, whatever. You're creating wealth, man. That's creating wealth. Okay. Miners, as in miners, with their rock hammers and their Brunton compasses and stuff like that, miners turn that into real wealth, but they come from time. They come from deep time. I mean, a banded iron formation, which are some of the most productive gold formations in the world. Those things are by definition 2 billion years old. That's because they were formed in Precambrian time in a whole different Earth atmosphere underneath that old, geologic feature called the ocean. Back, it was a whole different chemistry back then. The water was there, the H2O was there, but it was a different water chemistry, and you were precipitating out iron and gold. Bring it up, further. When you find go to any ore deposit anywhere. I mean, in the United States, Bisbee, Arizona, one of the great copper districts. That's a Jurassic age limestone, 200 and something million years old, intruded by, a granodiorite, and it turns all that beautiful green copper. Gives you that beautiful. Here's some beautiful blue azurite here from Bisbee, Arizona. There you go. I hope you can see the blue there. Where does this stuff come from? It's old. It's not just happening now. So the miners and the geologists and the geophysicists, the people who work with them, they're finding these old things, and they're bringing them to the surface, and they're turning them into real wealth, and that's what it's all about. So markets are about time. A lot of it's quick time, money times. Like, oh, I'm going to trade, buy, sell, whatever. Yeah, okay. That's what they do. Time is money, money is time. I saw this in a Chinese newspaper. I can't tell you if it's Sun Tzu who said this or Confucius, but it was in some Chinese newspaper. And it was an old Chinese saying says, "An inch of gold and an inch of time are both valuable." That's true, but an inch of gold will never buy an inch of time. And that's true too. For all the gold you have, you can only do what you do with the time you have. It's been a tough decade for the gold miners. Starting about 2011, we could go back into deeper time or deeper history than that. But for the longest time, crowds haven't liked the precious metals. I mean, they've gone up, they've gone down, but they've kind of there was this doldrums in 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15. In 2016, things took off. The gold moved up just a little bit, but the index has really skyrocketed. So part of investing in precious metals or mining in general is kind of being there at the right time. I mean, you gotta have something on the table there, because if you got nothing on the table and the whole sector goes rocket ride for you there, you miss out on that. It's not that you're going to miss out in the long term, but it's nice to try to catch some of that early stuff. So let's see. So markets are fickle about precious metals and mining stocks. I use these photographs. I got a guy eyeballing the girl. I got a girl eyeballing the guy, just to be neutral here. I was kind of like, hey, I thought you were with me. No, well, I'm just checking it out here, just looking around. I mean, we're walking down Gold Street, but that's Tesla walking the other way, or that's Bitcoin walking the other way. Markets want to see valuation. And here's a slide from Barrick. I mean, how do you create value? How do you create wealth? In a mining situation, you start off exploring. We'll talk about that in another minute here, a couple minutes or two. But you find something, and you realize, what is this? What do we have? What's the mineralogy? What's the size? What's the scope? What can we do with it? Barrick, big company, they're looking for tier 1 assets. They want great geology, and they have a lot of metrics for it. But there are a lot of things along the way, along that curve. Not good enough for Barrick, but they're plenty good for for somebody else. Somebody else can make money without all that barrack overhead, and value and wealth isn't created in the stock market, by the way. You think, oh, I bought a stock at 10 cents and it went to 30. Well, okay, was that because they pulled this drilled core out of the ground that had, was filled with copper and zinc and gold and everything else? Is that because they pulled a big chunk of sphalerite out of the ground? That's like, some of the purest zinc metal zinc minerals in the world, right there. Is that because of that? I'm just gonna show off some of my rocks and stuff here. I got. Is this because they pulled rutile, titanium mineral out of the ground? Look at that. These are rutile specimens. They're this bigger than my thumb. If you were mining that stuff, you would have the best titanium deposit in the world. You create your wealth in the field. You create your wealth out in the at the geological sense, by mapping, by doing geophysics. You create the wealth by drilling, by pulling cores out of the ground, putting them in the core shack, and doing the assays. That's where you create it. This chart by Barrick shows several, numerous well-known gold mines where most of the value was added after the stock market play happened. This is when the geologists went down there and found more and more and more. And and they were looking at it, and I was like, wow, this is where we're at. We're gonna grow some wealth here, aren't we? Common critiques of the juniors. Well, they destroy capital. Yeah, okay. Inefficient exploration. Yeah, we'll talk about that. They have bad capital discipline. Yeah, that's a good knock. And high G&A, general administrative. Yeah, okay. Let's talk about this. Capital destruction. That's fair, because a lot of companies have destroyed a lot of capital. A lot of other sectors destroy capital too. It's not that two wrongs make a right, but a lot of money, a lot more money has been destroyed in tech than has ever been destroyed in the mining sector, just as a matter of, numbers. Crypto, just you wait. There's a few cryptos that are doing really well. There's some cryptos that are just they've already, augured in. They're just total memories now. You have marijuana stocks, big huge thing a couple of years ago. And at least with a mine, you're producing real stuff. You're producing wealth. You're pulling your copper out. You're pulling your copper out. Here's a nice specimen of cuprite. Beautiful specimen, gorgeous. This is mineralogically gorgeous. You would take this and put it in a museum, except it's on one of my shelves here in the house. Real things, because of the 92 elements in the periodic table. 63 of those elements are inside your phone, inside your iPhone. It takes 63 pieces of the periodic table to build an iPhone. And you say, well, why is that? Well, it might only be a fraction of a gram, but without that fraction of a gram, your phone isn't going to work. Without a little bit of tungsten, it's not going to vibrate. Without the indium on the inside of the Gorilla Glass, you can't move the little swipey finger thing. Everything's there for a reason. Everything's there. Another critique that exploration is inefficient. Well, yeah, hello, it's called exploration for a reason, because you're looking for stuff. You don't know what you have until you look, and then you find it, or maybe you don't find it, and that tells you something too. And even if you find it, or if you don't find it, you still might know enough. You might not know enough. The world is filled with mineral deposits and with mines that have been overlooked by 2 or 3 or 4 previous people, or somebody came in, they high graded the good stuff, 100 years ago, and then they left a whole, steaming pile of nothing behind. And then somebody else came along and they fixed it. Got the single asset critique. Well, it's just one mine. Yeah. Well, you know what? All deposits are different, and everything is just one mine, in the sense that, if you're a big company, you can have more than just one mine. But if you're small and you're working on one deposit, work on it really well, make it work, and see what you can get out of it. Sometimes the deposit just needs a certain magic touch. You got to have the right geologist with the right ideas. We could talk all day about examples here. Other critiques: bad capital discipline, high G&A. Yeah. A lot of the mining industry and the companies who are presenting here, and it's about people. It's as much that as it is the geology. Yeah, you want to have great geology. You want to have huge, want to have great, high grades, great mineralization, lots of scope, lots of meters this way and meters that way, and lots of depth. You want that stuff, but can the team deliver the deliverables? It's one thing to sit on a great asset. It's another thing to really have the brains inside your head to make it work. Are management aligned with the shareholders? Very good question. How many shares do you own? How tight are you? Are there a whole separate class of shares for the management? Who's getting paid how much? And it's not an embarrassing question to ask. I mean, some people say, well, I only get paid $1 a year. Really? Well, and what's in it for you? But, I mean, are you really, so where's your reward? I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't like to work for free. I mean, if somebody's CEO and they're running the company, they ought to get a reasonable salary. What's reasonable? Well, people argue about that. That's why we have boards of directors. That's why boards get sued. What's the balance of risk versus reward? Where's the upside promise in all of this? So here's the message that you want to hear from the companies who are presenting. Do the ideas have geological merit? I mean, we'll talk about this in a second. What's the model? What's your geological model? Are you careful stewards of the money? I mean, if you're in North America and you have to fly to South America, don't be flying first class, right? You're flying coach. Too bad. But let somebody else fly up in front of the airplane. But you save that $3,000 ticket. And everything that a company is doing ought to be to de-risk the project. That's a really good question. What have you done to de-risk the project lately? When I say, what have you done for me lately? Well, I de-risked the project. Good. What did you do? Tell me about it. Well, we did this and that. Oh, there's a lot of ways to de-risk it. And what's the economic end game here? I mean, are we looking at a science experiment? Are we putting our money into this company just so that you can go out, drill holes, and write a paper and present it to some academic conference or something? That's nice, but I mean, that's not the investor game here either. The idea of geological merit, good jurisdiction for sure. I mean, you don't want the government to come in and grab it out from under you. You have a land package that you can actually work with. It's not inside a national park or something. You've got social license that that you're working with the First Nations. You're working with with the inhabitants in the region, in the area. When somebody lives everywhere. Pretty much somebody lives everywhere. There are a few places in the world where nobody lives there. Not very many, but you got to have your social license that you're getting along with the neighbors. You want to have good rocks as a geologist. I mean, people write books about good rocks. That's the study of geology right there. A working model. I'll tell you about that in a second here. The idea that you can build something that you're not in a national park, and it'll be economic. You can mine this stuff and actually make money at it. I just want to do a quick timeout. What's a model? What's a geological model? Well, on the left, I have a ship, a model from the Nautical Museum in Greenwich, England, right down the Thames River from London. And they have the incredible collection of ship models. In the olden days, when the Royal Navy was going to build a ship, and days before naval architects and CAD/CAM and all that kind of stuff, they had these guys that they would build a model of the ship. I mean, a real model with every spar, every cross brace, everything, and they would build them out just to make sure, okay, this is what the ship looks like and whatever. They had primitive little water basins where they would, look and see how the water flowed past and everything. That's the model. Well, how does that apply to the mining? Well, when you're out there looking at the side of a mountain, where all you see is brown stain on the side of the mountain, you've got to have a vision. What's my ore body? What's my grade? What's the scope? What's the size? How am I going to dig it? What's the size of the pit I'm going to have? The shell of the pit. What's it going to look like? How am I going to get in? How am I going to get out? What's the model? Those are the kind of questions you want to be asking of management. And they might say, well, it's too early to give you that specific. Okay, yeah, but what is your model? What's your geochemical model? What's your structural model? Why is this ore body here? Why is this stuff here? There's got to be a reason for it. Explain that to me. And then as far as the stewards of the money goes, I mean, you want management to brag about how hard they squeeze every penny. That they don't have all their relatives and friends on the payroll. You want management to own shares. You want them to be invested. You want them to, again, be thinking model. What is your model? Update the model, de-risk it. You want honesty. If we fail, we'll tell you. You're going to build a mine, okay? You're not going to build the Moscow subway with marble and bronze sculptures and chandeliers and stuff like that. Although the Moscow subway is probably pretty cool if you've never been there. It's worth a trip if you ever get the chance. But Moscow subway, that's one thing. Mines and mills, that's something else. Those are industrial. And then we get back to that de-risking issue. De-risking. You want to be looking far ahead. you're guarding the social license. You're not going to do something stupid and get everybody mad at you so that they yank your permits, and that's the next thing. You guard your air emission permit and your water permit and your drilling permit, your road permit. I mean, do not do something stupid. Oh man, I can't tell you how many. I've been to sites, where you drive onto the site and you look around, and it's a pigsty. I mean, it's just tobacco road, man. Just crap everywhere. There's just a bunch of old tires and old lumber and barrels of this and buckets of that, and like, this place looks like crap. And it's like, if this place looks like crap, what does the rest of it look like? What's going on inside your head? Get that disorganization out of your frame of operations here. Things like that. I mean, first of all, they're a bad indication of how management is managing, and secondly, you're lucky I'm not the permit guy. If I'm the permit guy and I walk in here and I said, maybe I'm gonna yank your solid waste permit or something, or it's like when we go on a helicopter ride. I want a safety brief. I've been on hundreds of helicopter rides. I flew in the Navy, man. I know all about helicopters. I know all about doing these kind of things. But if I'm going to ride in your helicopter, I want a safety brief, because if you don't give me a safety brief, what else are you not going to tell me? What else are you not thinking about? And then the data that comes, the drill holes, that's your intellectual property. That's as much your IP as Microsoft's, and their IP, or Google and their IP, or Uber and their car driving IP. I mean, your data, the data points from all the different holes that you're drilling, all the rock samples you're sampling, all the geophysics you're doing, all that stuff, it's all in some massive, it needs to be in some massive database, because the capability is there, the technology is there. And that's your IP, and you better guard it. You better make sure you're doing something with it. And again, I get back to this again and again. You have to be honest with yourself and with the shareholders, the stakeholders. I mean, if you're out there drilling and you don't find it, well, okay, you didn't find it. But don't tell me that we just need more money, and eventually, no. What's the next step now that you have not found it? So that's where we are. What's the end game? Well, in terms of mines and these mining companies, a lot of it's about geology and chemistry. Can the company figure it out? You want to see ore grade, and you want to see scope, you want to see size. Grade is king, size is better, especially when the grade is high. Can the management put together a project? Not that every management team is going to build something, but if they don't build it, can they sell it to somebody else with a monetizing event? Let somebody else build that project. And investors, they want their money back. Funny thing about that. And ideally, they want more. So with that, I have spoken for about 46 minutes. That's kind of what they told me to do. I think we have some questions. I assure you that the runway is open for Western metal suppliers. These are old paintings from the Soviet Union, because miners were heroes in the Soviet Union. They should be heroes in the West again. They should be heroes in North America, because they are providing the mines and the minerals and the metals and such that we need to re-electrify the country, build electric cars, kind of live our life, have our technology. Without that, it's back to the 1850s. And with that, I thank you, and I am perfectly happy, Mark, to speak for. We have another 10 or 12 minutes, I think. So if we want to answer some questions.
Very good.
I haven't been looking, but I've seen some questions flashing on the screen, but I don't want to be distracted by reading.
I appreciate that. Let me take care of that for you, Byron. I will say that you're one of the most colorful speakers we have in this conference series, and we're grateful. From everything from investing is like a day at the beach to got so many parallels. My favorite, of course, is if I'm going to ride in your helicopter and you don't give me a safety briefing, what else aren't you telling me? These are things we can take away as investors. So I'm deeply grateful for your color and commentary. Thank you very much.
Now for the incoming here. I got my hard hat on here. It's
very good.
A rock.
Well, we want to honor your place in the industry, I think, Byron. It's always great to have you a part of our journey. And you've done a wonderful job, as always, positioning where gurus and niche specialists are in the sector. So a question from Joel comes in and says, certainly thank you for your presentation. The question reads, if gurus and niche specialists, Byron, are what currently works, what do you see working in the next 3, 5, 10 years? What's your forecast for newsletter services moving forward?
Well, as with as with much in today's world, there's immense changes going on just because of COVID, the way people can work. For people who need to get out into the field and see things, somebody like me, that's hard. It's hard when you can't fly. But I have met and I have encountered a lot of really sharp people coming up, up the stream. There are people who are in the say the investment business who I've met people with like PhDs in metallurgical engineering who work for banks. And you say, well, what do you do? Well, I'm an analyst for the bank. Well, why aren't you a metallurgical engineer working for a metals company? Well, they are that bridge between the investor and the company.
Mm.
The newsletter business isn't going anywhere. There are people out there. It's relatively easy to be a newsletter writer today. All you need is a computer and a couple of hundred or a few $1,000 at most, and you set up your website and off you go. You're off to the races. It's a question of sort of weeding things out. Who's going to show a track record of success?
Mm-hmm.
The track record of success is going to have to unfold as things happen, and then it's going to be event driven too. If the markets keep going up, Bitcoin, Tesla, et cetera, like we're talking, well, the mines and miners you're going to have to struggle. And the mines and miners are going to have to show their success out in the field with their drill cores. We are creating wealth. We pulled this, big hunk of, copper infused drill core out of the ground. Okay, great. Now your stock gets to go up. The newsletter writers who can follow that and who can understand that and stay ahead of it, they're going to do well. As far as things like the internet chat rooms and stuff like that, I hardly ever look at those. Just because I know a lot of people do it. A lot of people get investment advice off these internet chat rooms, and I'm like, that's like saying, oh yeah, nothing's fake on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's trying to sell you something on those internet chat rooms, so be careful of it. At least with the newsletter writer, all they're trying to do is sell you a newsletter.
Right.
And ideally, the ethical ones, I sure as hell don't front run, the shares. I have no desire to get a phone call from the Securities Exchange Commission. So you want to.
Right.
I hope that answers the question a little bit. If the market crashes and gold goes from 2,000 to 25,000, just one of these apocalyptic things because the dollar has gotten blown up. Well, then all of our mines and miners and all of our gold and silver coins in our safe boxes and things like that, they're going to do well.
Fair enough. I think you very much clearly answered the question. I appreciate that. We have time for one more just as we move towards the top of the hour, Byron, and I'll leave you with this. The question from the audience comes in very genuinely. Will you be publishing, Byron, a 2021 wrap-up or 2022 outlook? Because we'd love to hear your thoughts on what's ahead.
Well, I am. The answer is yes. And let's see. We have about 2 weeks till sort of like the end of 2021 in terms of we're December, whatever it is, and we're going to be slowing down in about a week and a half. But in early 2022, I'm going to be definitely looking forward, and so you will find my name out there attached to a couple of articles about where do we go from here. So the answer is yes. Thank you.
Beautiful, Byron. I have to say, on behalf of the entire audience, Laurentian Bank Securities, who helped make this event happen as our sponsor, we're always graced with your presence, wisdom, and bird's eye perspective. Thank you for your time.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thank you. And to everybody who's watching, good luck in life and certainly in your investing.
Thank you, Byron. Greatly appreciate your presence here. And to everyone watching, once again, we're approaching the top of the hour. So as we end this webinar, you'll be moved to a survey. And I know there'll be some great feedback from Byron's perspective here. And then at the top of the hour, of course, we have Wesdome Gold Mines joining us. So we'll look forward to that as well. We'll see you in the next room. Byron, all the best for the holidays. Take care.
Okay. Thank you.